Hello, Internet, and thank you for joining me today. So, it's after Labor Day, which makes it spooky season. Now, unironically, this is my favorite time of year. The time where all the little failed abortions go back to school and the parks are free for me to cruise for single moms that are really desperate and have no standards. But it's also the time for horror movies to play non-stop on satellite TV. And for those of you like me that look through people's windows that have satellite TV, that comes as a very special treat for us. One thing that becomes apparent after you spend any time around me is that I am the easiest lay in the world for anything related to witches. Witch things, witch stuff, doesn't matter. I'm all about it all the time. Salem is one of my favorite places I've ever vacationed. I read The Crucible every year in high school, and Sarah Jessica Parker in Hocus Pocus was what one might call a formative experience. So yeah, any stories about witches make it onto my to-do list pretty quick, and I try to get to them as quickly as I can. And while I don't believe in TikTok, occasionally I do get laid. And occasionally, after the vigorous lovemaking, we like to have a conversation with the carbon based life forms that we're with. And she likes to talk about book talk and recommended me the book Slewfoot, which is what I'm here to talk about today. Didn't you read the title? Now, hypothetically, this book is about witches. However, as we're going to journey through this, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not going to try to summarize this book. I'm just going to read the summary from Goodreads. A spirited young English woman, Abatha. Fucking Abatha? Really? Whatever. Arrives at a Puritan colony betrothed to a stranger, only to become quickly widowed when her husband dies under mysterious circumstances. All alone in this pious and patriarchal society, Abatha fights for what little freedom she can grasp onto, while trying to stay true to herself and her past. Enter Slewfoot, a powerful spirit of antiquity, newly woken, and trying to find his own role in the world, healer or destroyer, protector or predator. But as the shadows walk and villagers start dying, a new rumor is whispered. Witch! Both Abatha and Slewfoot must swiftly decide who they are and what they must do to survive in a world intent on hanging any who would meddle in the dark arts. Jesus tits, kill me. Now, with a summary like that, you might be thinking that gender roles might be a big topic, along with some magic, and since it's from TikTok, maybe some sex. Well, let me disperse these rumors here. There's little to no sex. The magic is only under very strict circumstances and goes nowhere. And the gender politics, well, we'll put a pin in that for a second, because what 40% of this book is really about is Puritan laws and land distribution. For two-thirds of this book, we follow Abatha as she fights against her brother-in-law to keep her land that her late husband was trying to buy from him. I could get more into it, but I tried writing it out several different ways and I got bored each time. So we're just going to move on from how that all worked out. The moral of the story is she's having to buy this land that she lives on. And honestly, it's just really, really boring. So whenever you do get the occasional lore or a couple of pages about this ancient goat god thing, Slewfoot, you drink that in like it's a full keg and the bartender isn't watching. Now let's go ahead and pull the pin out of that gender politics stuff, because I say that makes up about 30% or so of this book, and it basically all revolves around this character of her brother-in-law, named Wallace, being the biggest mustache twirling villain with literally no redeeming qualities. And when I say no redeeming qualities, at one point he tries to enslave Abby. Yeah, I'm not saying Abatha anymore. That's nonsense. But the whole enslavement thing is literally unprompted. The situation is she has to bring in this harvest by herself to be able to pay off that loan or whatever it is that she's trying to pay off to the brother-in-law. And if she can't pay it off, then she will be an indentured servant of his in his household. And the big problem with that is that at this point in the book, she's already struggling to work the farm. She's already having all of these other problems going on, like she can't hitch the mule. She can't, get any kind of income coming in. And then out of nowhere, it's like, oh yeah, and it gets worse. And it's literally for no reason other than to make him look even more evil, which we didn't need help with. He's already basically looking like the worst guy in the town, and a lot of people are even against him, which we'll get into a little bit later. But a lot of people don't even like him in the town, so even by Puritan standards, he's seen as kind of a sexist asshole. So it's really unnecessary that he would just all of the sudden come up and say, oh, and by the way, if you don't pay me, you're going to be my slave. So as I was sitting there reading that part, I had to ask myself, why have it? It doesn't change the stakes that are being set up. It doesn't change any of the characters or our understanding of them. And it doesn't feed into the overall plot or themes for the rest of the book. It just makes Wallace look like an even bigger asshole. And what compounds this is that there are several chapters where we're supposed to be seeing things from Wallace's perspective. And really, the only thing in these chapters that we see from his perspective is that he doesn't want to lose his dad's land that apparently was very hard fought for. It's kind of unclear on that. But what is clear is that it was very unnecessary to essentially go out of his way to be an asshole to his sister-in-law, which in those chapters, he kind of doesn't even care about Abby. He just sees her as annoying and goes against the grain of the society. But really, we all kind of know why this is in this book. It's because he's the stand-in for a patriarchal society. And him being the only one that represents that makes everyone else seem hyper progressive. And it kind of takes away from the stakes of her, because it's just one of these things that if she can beat him, then she wins, as opposed to a more typical story you would imagine of what you would want in a feminist story, where she's having to fight the entirety of society, because that's really how it was from all accounts. But to me, all of the feminist messaging in this book falls on its face with basically the patriarchal society being isolated to Wallace and maybe, I guess if you want to argue, two other characters. But it falls on its face because everything else that Abby does is basically handed to her via magic. Like, she grows magic crops, she gets magic bee honey, she gets a whole bunch of magic healing and stuff, because there was a time in the book where she was basically starving herself trying to keep up with all the, farm chores and stuff. But then she magically heals herself. And it's like if at the end of Harry Potter, he comes back to life, and instead of all the magic he learned over the past 6 books, he just comes in with a Glock and domes he who shall not be named. But really, for this comparison to work, the 4th and 6th books would both basically just be about wizarding copyright law or something else mundane and boring as hell. Now, I gotta say, with all of that nonsense out of our way here. When the book is being about witch things, it's not bad. Uh, Slewfoot is kind of like some ancient pagan god, and a long time ago, apparently, he was killed by a different ancient god. And they both came over from Europe, and there's some kind of conflict there. All of that's very mysterious and neat, and I kind of like it when it's doing everything like that. But then it kind of just stops because two-thirds of the way through the book, the other god, the not Slewfoot guy, he just gets killed by Slewfoot, and it's literally just Slewfoot remembering, "Oh yeah, I'm stronger than you," and then it's over. Like there's no build up to that. There's no satisfying payoff to this. It's just a hey, by the way, I'm a demon goat god thing and you're not. So you're dead. So that little part of the book gets wrapped up, with about 50 pages left. And then you just have this trial. And if you thought all the sexism stuff was really boring and you thought all the land bickering up until this point was really boring, you're really not going to enjoy those last 50 pages, maybe the last half dozen or so, because they finally wrap up the trial. But yeah, the trial is the most boring thing I might have ever read, and it's really insufferable because the entire time she did it. I mean, we've watched her commit witchcraft, which, say what you will about, them not liking witchcraft, or it's wrong that they're basically in a no-win situation, that, she can't admit that she was a witch because they'll burn her, and she can't deny that she's a witch because they'll just torture her until she admits that she's a witch. All of that kind of goes out the window because you, the reader, saw her do magic. So, regardless of what we know and what we think is good, the characters in this book would be freaked out by that. And they would understandably be like, oh, hey, all the teachings that we have where magic gets you sent straight to hell? Yeah, she did all that. So, we're just going to go ahead and burn her so that we don't go to hell. I can't believe that there's a story that basically tries to emulate the Salem witch trials, but then makes me sympathize with all of the random sexists and the religious bigots that make up the townsfolk more so than the protagonist, because she's really kind of bland. I didn't think that she was that compelling of a character. And especially when it comes to the trial, like, she doesn't really stand on her own. She still has to be carried by all of these people around her. Like, there's a sheriff character who's real nice to her. The main minister of the town is real nice to her and stuff. So you kind of don't see her as a victim. Uh, it's kind of like watching the OJ trial, except with the opposite verdict. You know, uh, you have the sense that justice isn't being served because the laws are all bullshit, but at least you're at the end of the book, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. And ironically, you know who did this exact scenario pretty well? Paranorman. Because in Paranorman, the evil patriarchal men, they literally just come out and say it, that they were scared. They understood that what they were doing probably wasn't right, but they were scared of the consequences of not doing that thing that their society often tells them to do. Which, you don't look at their actions as being any worse or better, but you can at least see them as characters and they're not just, two dimensional assholes. Now, for eagle eyed viewers at this point, you might get some math going in your brain, and it might seem like I haven't covered all of this story. And I really haven't, because at the end of the book, Brahm, the author, I don't know if you're male or female, so I'm just going to call you Brahm, uh, just gets bored. Brahm just gets bored of the book that they are making and decides they're going to write Carrie. That's really the only way I can describe it, because all of a sudden she gets magic powers because Slewfoot comes into Deus Ex Machina the situation. She grows goat legs and starts murdering everyone. People that were mean to her, people that were nice to her, people that were indifferent to her existence, all start getting got. And what really kind of puts the ultimate kicker on this is that both her and Slewfoot get shot, and that is detrimental to them. You see, anytime we try to utilize older monsters, like say vampires show up in a modern day movie that's set in modern times, most of the time they come up with a reason that guns don't really work on them too well. Either they heal too fast or whatever. You see this in stuff like Blade, like Underworld. Uh, I don't know what modern vampire media there is out there. Not my thing, really. Um, but you don't make your monsters vulnerable to firearms because it makes it too easy for everyone in the story in a modern age. Now, this isn't even set in the modern age. It's set in like ye olde times, when they're doing Salem witch trials and whatnot. So for them to almost die from gunshot fire that is the proto version of what we have today makes them seem very weak. It makes me wonder why anybody couldn't have done this. Like, why were bows and arrows not effective in this? How come the ancient god Slewfoot wasn't clubbed to death way earlier in his existence? This doesn't make sense. Like, they try to give it stakes, but they just end up making a whole mess of the thing. And then everyone's dead, and the book ends with an epilogue where Abby and Slewfoot are chilling in Appalachia in 2010 or whatever, and everyone's fine and happy, and they both got goat legs. That's it. Really, this whole book can be summarized in the character's name, Abatha. The idea behind naming her Abatha is that you want your character to be named Abby, but you're setting it in ye olde times, so you need it to sound ye olde. So you just threw something that sounded kind of right. But instead, whenever I hear the name Abatha, it sounds like I'm trying to chew a mouthful of nails. It's awful. And that's really where I had the biggest stumbling blocks with this book, that the author Brahm is trying to say something profound. And I feel like it's down in there really deep, but the book is getting in its own way by having to add in a sophomoric understanding of, old English speak, and you end up just with something that sounds like it was written by somebody in middle school, with a lot of these and thous and prithee and all this nonsense words that are in no way organized, and you don't really get a good sense that that is how people would be talking because it's inconsistent. Had Brahm just named the character Abby and moved on with life, I think we would have been a lot better off. And if we had just committed to a more consistent tone of even modern day English, maybe not like slang terms, but just speaking in a more modern way and not trying to crowbar in all this stuff about thee and thou, that would have been a stronger way to go. It really just comes off that the book is trying to be pretentious as hell. And really, everything in this book is just a much worse version of the movie The Witch. which might be one of my favorite movies I've seen in the last 10 years. And I really wanted to do a video about The Witch, but instead I did this video. And because I didn't want to do this video as much, it took me a lot longer, and I didn't even get it out before Halloween. And I'm kind of upset about it because I had like 3 videos for Halloween, and I'm just going to cut it off there. Yeah, so if you were interested in something in this post Halloween season for pre Halloween next year, go watch The Witch. That's a great movie. Does everything that this book sets out to do, but 10 times better. All the gender stuff is better, all the settings are better, and all the magic stuff is better. It's a lot scarier, and it's just better in pretty much every way. You should also watch Paranorman, which is another video I wanted to do but didn't get a chance to. Maybe next year if my channel takes off and I'm still doing this. But for now, I want to thank everyone for listening to this. I hope everyone had a fantastic Halloween. And until next time, I'll see you in the next one. And if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos if you want to see me ramble some more. If you wouldn't mind leaving me a comment on what I should review next, that would probably be a better system than what I'm currently doing, which is just whatever comes up. Thank you, and good night.